Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. This is where you want to go vent these days. $2.99 per month. You click on the link right here in the description. You will bypass the Apple upcharge. We call this the place for information, conversation, and consternation. The most heat anywhere, it's Off the Floor. Make sure you check it out today and join a great community. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Includes Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. You want to make these games interesting? Have something on them. That's what we tell you. You go to prizepicks.com. Use the code 5. Play up to 6 players together. Legal again in the state of Florida. Get their Taco Tuesdays, their Flex Fridays. It's all on there on Prize Picks. Daily Fantasy Simplified, the official fantasy partner of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports as we continue our More on the Floor series. And we're doing this in part because people are tired of hearing from us. I mean, you're stuck with me on this episode, but I feel for Greg, man. Like, I'm trying to give Greg some days off because he's got to host these post-game shows. And the only difference is how big the lead is that they're going to blow. Now, against the Clippers, it was just 2 points. It happened early. The pain was quick there. Just ripped the Band-Aid off. You knew they weren't coming back in that game. Made a little bit of a late push in the third quarter, but otherwise couldn't get there. But Brady and I recently did an episode on the worst losses of the season, and we didn't even get to some of the worst losses in the season because there have been so many of them. And then additionally, I did an episode with Eternal, our host on Playback, about Bam and kind of his strong stretch of play, but we jinxed him because then he had his worst game he's had in about 3 weeks. Today I've got Sean Rochester. Hopefully he won't jinx anybody else. You can follow him at S Rochester NBA. You can also find him on Off the Floor with us and on various other platforms. And I want to bring Sean on for this reason because I think you've been a contrarian to some on Heat Twitter of late. Who I think in some ways can't make up their mind. So let me throw this at you. And I don't mean to blanket everybody because not everybody has the same opinions there. There are a lot of player stands there, which means like there's those who are waiting for Hero to have a bad game or those who are waiting for Bam to have a bad game. Those who believe that Spo has had a lot of bad games. And that's pretty much where we're going to go with this. But my sense of this, Sean, is that the majority of Heat Twitter is angry at the front office for not upgrading this team while they had Jimmy, has mixed feelings about the actual trade of Jimmy and what the return was, doesn't think this is a particularly good team, but is also all over Spo for not using that not particular team, good team well. You've been a little bit more definitive on this in the sense of you've just made it clear this is not a good roster. And that it really doesn't matter to some degree, or maybe to a large degree, and that's what I want you to clarify here, what Eric Spolstra does. So let's start here. This roster, as it stands right now, how would you grade it?
Wow. I mean, a D+, C-. I mean, it's somewhere in that range. I mean, at best, it's a C. I think, you know, a lot of people, you talk about this roster, it's mid. I mean, it's just an average team. Like, and, you know, you can reference the times that, yeah, we beat the Cavs and we have wins against good teams and we've looked good at times. There's also times that you can just look in the last week. You've blown leads to the Charlotte Hornets. You've lost to really bad teams. So that's the characteristics of a bad team. they're going to have their moments. That's the NBA. Like, you're going to have those weird outcomes sometimes. Maybe sometimes it's a schedule, but like overall, the roster, even going back pre-Jimmy trade, and you've referenced this a bunch of times, and I think this is very true. They were okay when Jimmy wasn't on the floor. They found ways to survive, and they weren't great, but they were okay. Now you add to that roster because you subtract Jimmy, who wasn't already there, but then add in the pieces, Wiggins, Mitchell, etc. In theory, they should be better because you have more, but you still don't have enough. And I think that's where, like, as you talk about the discourse on Twitter or on our Discord, I think the hard thing, I think, for fans right now is, one, everyone's frustrated. Like, I keep joking, you can pick whoever you don't like the most. Sometimes some people don't like Tyler, some people don't like Bam, some people don't like Spo, the front office, whomever. Altogether, we're all frustrated. Like, nobody can sit back here and look at this and be like, yeah, this is really enjoyable. Like you said, poor Greg has to watch all these post-game and do all these post-game shows. Like, it's just not good. But collectively, we're all in that. But the reasoning isn't like, there isn't one reason. I think we always try to nail it down to, like, last night it was Tyler Hero was inefficient. That's why no, it's like, there's multiple things about this that got us to this point. Even going back to, like, the front office decisions years ago, trading a first round pick for Terry Rozier. It was a collective of things that got us here. So it's not that Spo isn't having a bad season. He probably is. But I also, and I'm sure we'll get into this, like, I also don't think he has many good decisions that he can make. Is it Tyler? I mean, it's just down the line. I think there's so many things that you have to add up, and that's why we're stuck in this spot, unfortunately.
Well, there's so many things that go into coaching a team, and some of them, and what fans see is just the rotations, right? They see the rotations, and they see him calling a timeout in Detroit that he didn't have, or the playing over Rozier all these minutes. And again, I understand the frustrations with all that. There's also everything that's been going on behind the scenes this year, and that is, him having to manage a team whose star quit. I mean, we can argue whether or not he should have or shouldn't have, or what the front office should have done. But from the coach's perspective, a coach who had leaned on that player. Look, I watched them in training camp. I watched him sitting there with Jimmy on the side and them talking and laughing and all this. This is not a fun experience for Eric Spolstra to have the guy that he was leaning on, who he protected publicly for 5 years. Okay, when there was stuff going on behind the scenes that fans didn't know about, to have that guy basically just bail, and not only just bail, but throw him under the bus, to say, essentially that he didn't like the offense and all the rest of this, whereas he had expressed repeatedly that Spo was the best coach that he had played for. And those around him had expressed that too. Now we're hearing out of Golden State, that Steve Kerr is allowing him to do things that the Heat never allowed him to do, which I'm sure is even more frustrating for Spo. But again, he had to manage the fact that other players didn't know whether Jimmy was going to be in or out, had to manage the fact that the front office was trying to maximize the asset as much as they could under the circumstances. And so they didn't want certain things out. It hasn't been an easy season for Spo. With that being said, he's made more mistakes, in my view, than I've ever seen him make in a season. So I think both things can be true. The Rozier thing, to me, let's focus on that at first here, because that is the one that you've pushed back on the most. That is, to me, the most mystifying, because I don't understand. I get your point that he's not solely responsible for these losses. Of course he's not. Okay, I'm with you on that. But I haven't understood the Heat's approach on it, particularly as I'm watching Larson play last night. And I'm not saying that Larson's polished. He's not. He needs to improve his shot. There's a lot of but he plays with a certain physicality or the rest of this. And I'm like, okay, he couldn't have been worse than Rozier has been. Now, Burks is not available now, but Burks also couldn't be worse than Rozier has been. And I guess I haven't understood their approach to Rozier, because you're past the trade deadline. You're not maximizing any kind of asset. Now, everybody around the league sees what this is. And the only value that Terry Rozier is ever going to have now in the trade market is when he becomes an expiring contract and someone's trying to clear cap space. Why do you think Spo has been so stubborn about that, even if you don't think that's been the major issue this year?
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying in that Terry clearly hasn't been good. And I don't think I've actually been contrarian to the fact of that. Like, I think I was one of the first few people last year, and I was with you guys on the previous season that it was a good acquisition. Early this season, when he's dribbling the hell out of the ball, and we're constantly talking about that on playback, like, that was frustrating to me because I think he was hijacking the offense. Now, what I've been saying is I just don't think there's an alternative that is a good option. And I say that to clarify, like, we know Terry has been a net negative. You can look at metrics, plus minus, and not single game plus minus, but over the course of many, many, many games, repeatedly, he is negative. We can all agree on that. I think where sometimes it gets lost is that whoever you put into the game is not necessarily either neutral or positive. They may still be negative, just a little bit better, because while you say they can't be as bad, they could. The reason they can't be as bad is because Terry is so damn bad. It's almost inconceivable that someone could play that far negative. And that's what's like the frustrating thing, because I'm not defending Terry. By all means, don't play him at all. I would agree with that. And I agree with you, guys like Pella, whomever. I don't think they're great options, but shoot, at least they're young. See what you got. And now when we need to make decisions this summer, now you have some more information at your disposal where, all right, I like what I saw out of Pella, or I like whomever, Keyshawn Johnson, blah, 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 blah. Down the line, you get more information. And I, for one, because of Terry Rozier being a point guard, that I don't care about the positions. I'm not playing him because I need a ball handler on the floor. I'm not playing him because I have a sport. What are you playing him for? I don't have the answer to that. I just don't know. And your last point about the trade value, he's not rebounding his trade value. Like, he's not going out in the next 15, 20 games, and GMs are like, oh, damn, Terry's back. I want his expiring. No, come on. Like, what are we doing?
No, it's simply a contract at this point. And that we'll have to see how many teams actually want the Castaway. I guess my thought on it is this, okay? You make decisions to keep certain guys on two ways, right? Like they put a lot of care into that. They do. They try to develop players. We've seen so many of them have popped. Just one example here. They've got a former first-round pick in Josh Christopher, okay? A couple teams have given up on him. He looked good in summer league, okay? Has a particular skill set that they seem to lack, which is he has a knack to score the ball, okay? Now, I don't know how efficiently he'll score the ball. In summer league, he was sort of allowed to run the offense late in games, and he could shoot his way out of things. He got hot a couple of times. Again, I don't see that role for him in the NBA. I think in the NBA, he's more, if he's going to stick in the NBA, he's got to become more of a 3-and-D guy with athleticism, all right? That's kind of – but my thing is, if you're keeping him around – forget the Isaiah Stevens one, because like you said, you're saying you don't really need a point guard. But if you're keeping someone like Josh Christopher around, this is a team that struggles to score. They go through long, long, long droughts. They can't create in any way. You're not going anywhere. Like, you're not going anywhere up, and you're not going anywhere down. So, like, I don't know. Like, why not just shut Rozier down at this point and see what you have with Christopher for 10 games and whether or not this is a player worth keeping? I'm not saying he's going to be perfect. He's going to make mistakes. No question about it. But, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't know. And I don't know if this is Spo or those above him. I don't know if they fully processed the idea that they are stuck, at least for this season. They are stuck. They are stuck between 7 and 10. I know that teams, that Heat fans would like them to drop beyond 10. It's not going to happen, okay? And that's even with me looking at a schedule that still has 2 Knicks games on it, a Houston, a Detroit, Golden State, of course. I'm looking at my calendar, so I'm peeling up Milwaukee, 2 Memphises. Okay, they're probably going to lose all of those games, and they literally could lose at this point to Washington, to Charlotte, who they still play, to Philadelphia, either of those 2 times, to Chicago. They keep losing to Chicago. They've got a game against Chicago on April 9th up there that may be for the 9 seed. Even with all of that, the Sixers are not passing them. You're in Philadelphia. The Nets are not passing them. They are stuck between 7 and 10. The worst case scenario, I think, for Heat fans is they end up 10. Spo figures it out for 2 games. Okay? 2 games. They win 2 road games against bad teams, because all of these teams are bad. Okay? Atlanta is bad. Chicago is bad. Orlando at this moment is bad. Okay? They win these 2 games, and they end up stuck in a 1-8, get swept by Cleveland, and they don't keep their pick. That's the worst case scenario for a lot of Heat fans. Now, some in Heat management will say, well, it's not so bad, because then you unlock protections later. You still get the Golden State pick, even though obviously it's dropped. But I guess, Sean, that's where I'm at with it is I feel like Spo is still like coaching for his life every game, but not particularly well, when just play the kids and see what you have. There's literally nothing to lose right now.
I will say this, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, when Ethan looked to the side, and then he was looking at his calendar, I thought at first you were looking at the standings, and I was going to make sure we get an interior design sponsor, because if you have the standings for this Heat team up on your wall, we have serious problems within 5 reasons. I was really worried for you. To your point, though, you know what? I agree with you. Play those other people. But what I've said repeatedly is this: the moment you do that, us as fans, and I think also management, you have to eliminate any attachment to results. You're playing those kids. If you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. We're not criticizing rotations. We're not criticizing any. It is just literally throw them out there and see what we got. And I think you made this point before. Our franchise, they're not tanking doing that. If that were the decision, they're also not tanking by playing Terry as much as it seems like way. They're going to go out there and compete, and you're going to see what happens. Sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose. I think they're going to be at a talent deficit because of playing those guys, but at least you're collecting information. Yes, you can get stuff out of being on the practice floor and the stuff that they're doing behind the scenes, but I think real game minutes, even though at the end of the season, sometimes it's weird because other teams are doing the same tanking nonsense. It's not really competitive as it is during the playoffs or during the regular season and other times. I still think it's valuable. And that I agree with you. That's the route that I would go, because you're not going any higher. You're not going any lower. And who knows, maybe you find that, I don't know, Isaiah Stevens is just a great facilitator. He can overcome his defensive deficiencies. And maybe you find a guy that you're like, you know what? That's a guy I want to invest in more. Or the opposite way. Maybe you find, look, Josh Christopher, Summer League, great. Real NBA, that's not it. We're moving on from him. Spot. Just gather information, because what else are you playing for? It's all decided already. You're going to be somewhere in that range, and we're going to be out of it by – we're not playing basketball in May. That'd be my prediction. I mean, it's not happening.
No, I'm already planning podcasts to get us through May. There's no way they're playing basketball in May. So I just don't see, and they know that. That's the thing. They know that. And anything else is just like, okay, we're trying to get a rotation together so we can be in the best possible shape going into the play-in and the playoffs. Why? I mean, another thing was like Jovic getting hurt, to me. That killed this also, because from what they needed from this team, but also what they wanted to see from a 21 going on 22-year-old, he was providing something. They finally found him a role. Now they don't even have that. I want to at least see some of the other young players. We're seeing Jaquez can't get consistent minutes now. He played 6 last night. Larson got the minutes ahead of him. And it's hard to argue with that with the way Jaime's played this season. I feel like he needs a full kind of reboot this offseason. They need to break everything down and figure out what he's going to be, if he's going to be here. But I don't understand it. I was pushing for them to play Bam and Tyler close to 40 minutes when I thought there was a chance for them to move up. There's no chance. They're way too far behind Indiana, Detroit, and they just keep losing every day. So I mean, I don't really get where they're at with it. All right, do you want to mention another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network as soon as I can find it? By the way, that is not the schedule up to my it's a schedule. I'm sorry, it's not the standings. I don't put the standings up to get depressed on a daily basis. Do want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We know that car accidents are depressing, right? But after one happens, you need to get your money. And that's why we tell you to reach out to our guy, Eric Rubenstein. You can find him at ericrubenstein.com, 877-829-ERIC. That's 877-829-ERIC, or 877-829-3742. Eric Rubenstein, the best of the business, grew up down here, went to St. Thomas University, graduated magna cum laude, grew up in Lauderhill, huge Miami Heat fan. He knows everybody in town, but the most important thing is, again, he can help you get your money. So you have a car accident, a slip and fall, anything along those lines, reach out to Eric today. Also follow him at Attorney Rubenstein. You will not be disappointed on Instagram. He's really the most interesting man in the world. Check it out, ericrubenstein.com. Find him at the Heat game, suffering along with you, 877-829-3742. Let me ask this specifically about Spo. It is generally recognized that he is among the best coaches in the NBA. His peers had him top again in the executive survey. This is now 3 straight regular seasons, though, and this is the worst of the 3, that they're a tough watch. Okay, they're a tough watch. Now we can talk about the roster, and I know you have. And now they don't even have Jimmy to mask some of that stuff to save them in the last 6 minutes by getting to the line, slowing the game down, and all that. Offensively is really where they're a tough watch. They have not I don't know. They just have not broken through. He tried something different this preseason. All it seemed to do was piss off his star. One of the two guys he leaned into was Rozier. That has not worked out very well. It seems like it's benefited Tyler for most of the season at least, but otherwise, again, we're not. I don't know. He's known for creativity during the Big Three era, pace and space, all this sort of stuff. Do you think he's lost something, or do you think he's just, again, this is just a product of a roster that nobody could do anything with?
Yeah, and I know this is going to be portrayed as me being a Spo apologist and all that different stuff, but like I just don't know what offense can you run with this group of people that is going to be any different. Like I just don't think there is one. It's they are a product of those parts. Like they don't have the offensive talent to compete in today's NBA. And we did this a couple times on the Discord in the last week or so, is like Tyler and Bam. The other night we lost to Charlotte. You have Bridges and LaMelo. Those two are more high-powered. And on one given night, on one given sample, we're about to enter March Madness. On one game, those guys can beat you. And LaMelo didn't even have a good game that night. Like, I'm not saying that because I don't think Bam and Tyler are good enough. Like, they're good players, but they're not cast to be number one, number two. And this kind of was what you talked about with Eternal. I think they need to be number 2 and number 3, and we don't have number 1. Andrew Wiggins is not number 1. And so how do you fix that? Well, there isn't an immediate fix. There isn't an offense scheme that you change that all of a sudden that works. It's not a rotation, switch that changes that. So, I don't think the offensive scheme itself, like I know that there were changes this year. They leaned into the threes more. They played a little bit more 5 out. Bam steps out more. Now you're playing 2 bigs with Kalel. I think there's been signs of growth, but it's not a magic fix. I also don't really think has he lost it? I don't think do we need an offensive coordinator? We need a new idea, maybe infuse new ideas, but I don't feel like what we do in Miami is drastically different than the offense that is run basically anywhere else in the league. Like Memphis is very different because they don't do a lot of ball screening. Golden State is different because of the Curry and Kerr concepts, but we're closer to a Golden State offense than we are like a bland vanilla offense that doesn't work. I just don't think there is a scheme. All of a sudden we're going to start running a flex offense, or we're going to start infusing more, with zoom screens, whatever. I don't know what you're doing that all of a sudden fixes it. That's why I keep saying I think it's a talent issue. And I would lean into getting more offensive talent. The problem then is, you can see it this year, our defense has suffered now too. So we're not good on either side of the floor.
Well, the defense, and I want to close with this. The defense is cratering lately, and first we see them score 86 points in Atlanta, right? Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the low point offensively. And then the next night next time they played Atlanta, they shot the hell out of it, right? So a lot of times it is just a make or miss situation. They ended up scoring 130, but the defense to me is almost more disappointing than the offense, because I do think they have defensive personnel on this team now. Now, they didn't before the deadline when Jimmy was kind of half-assing it, not playing to his capability. I watched him in Golden State the other day. That looks like a different guy. He cares right now, which is not surprising, and he's going to care through this playoff run, and then we'll kind of see what happens from there. But you've added Wiggins, who has been productive. I think the thing on Wiggins is, I think what you're seeing is he's a productive player. If he fits in as your number 3, number 4, then you're in good shape. And I think could be worth that contract in the right context on a team. But he kind of puts up a quiet 20. He puts up a quiet 20 that's not he doesn't needle move, so to speak, the way that Jimmy could when he just imposed his will on the game. I think that's the big difference. But he is a good defender. We know that. He has been. He's done it at the highest level against the best wings in the league. Davion Mitchell is a demon defensively. I absolutely want them to keep him. They've added those 2 pieces. They've infused, Kyle Anderson at times, who's a good defender in terms of positionally. They've subtracted, Jovic, who had sort of gotten to a certain point, and he's playing Haywood more now again. I don't like this idea that they don't have any defenders. They do now. So why have they been so bad on that end of time? Allowing 62% to that Clippers team without Norm Powell and without Kawhi Leonard is disgusting. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, you have the pieces there. I wonder how much of it is a mental thing that's going on with this team. Like, you're disappointed, the season's not going well. Obviously, the offense sometimes can bleed into your defense. When you're so poor offensively, one, you're giving up transition opportunities because they're not taking the ball out of the net. Other teams are going the other way. And I know, I think it was Cooper Moorhead that cited this. They don't turn people over anymore. So they're not getting easier opportunities to not only help their defense, but help their offense. I think you have pieces there that eventually will work. The guys that you named, Mitchell, I like, but I also think that they're somewhat overcast, that like Tyler is having to be your number one, or Bam is having to be your number one, more of like 2 or 3. Mitchell is trying to be your 2 or 3. He's really more of a number 4. Mitchell, I like, probably not a starter in a lot of cases, better as a 6th man. Like, everyone's having to play one notch up, and it's hard for them to do that. It's almost not fair to them to do that. So, like, if you can find that guy, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this all summer because we're going to be hoping for it. Now those guys slot back down into spots that are more appropriate for them, then that's great. Or you get the growth of Ware, Jovic, Jaquez, someone like that, your draft pick, that can suddenly infuse talent that way or jump up notches, because you kind of know who Wiggins is. You kind of know who Bam is. You kind of know who Tyler is. They're not going to suddenly just like vault into notches above. So I think there's opportunity there. It's just we're stuck in a few more weeks of dealing with this. So real change can be made.
And you were right about where I think a lot of us were, that there were going to be these pockets of the season where he just looks overmatched. And going against the big centers like Zubac, he looks overmatched. That's the thing. And I think what the prescription is for him now. It is, he's got to get in the weight room. He's got to go on the Jovic plan. He's got to, and then he's got to learn how to use that weight, which is the next step to this. But that's why I wanted him to get the minutes when he did. I don't think playing him has sacrificed this season. I think that the roster as the season started, the Jimmy situation, other factors that have come into play here. I think it's been good that he's gotten this time, but I think we've also seen, like, there is, and I think it gets back to your point as we close. I think there just is no panacea to this. I think that there's a blame to go around. Look, when you're losing the kind of games they're losing lately, and one of my concerns has been, well, not concerns, but frustration has been their composure. They don't have collective composure as a team. And I think part of this is, as we cycle back to the start, I think when Jimmy was here, even if he wasn't playing, there was still this comfort level that, okay, like, we're going to be all right. And then since he's been gone, instead of doing what I thought it would do, which was like relieve this stress on them because of all the circus that was going on this year, it feels like it relieved it on Bam, but everybody else has kind of, it's been too much for them. And it just feels like when you're sort of spinning your wheels and you're a team that's really not going anywhere, I think that is where you see what happened against the Clippers, where again, you're just not defending anybody. And Bogdanovich, who I don't think had a double-digit game in like 3 weeks, and he's putting up, what was it, close to 30 on you. Like, it's just ridiculous. So just frustrations all around, but we appreciate Sean's perspective here. Again, you can follow him at S Rochester NBA. We'll be putting out more episodes with more from our crew, as we go forward here. And of course, we're going to be covering the NBA into the playoffs as well. Have a good one, Sean. Thanks to our sponsors, EricRubenstein.com. Glad to see you. Are you in a car?
Yeah, I had to step out. It is warm here, though.
Well,
it's one positive thing. It is like in the 60s here. So
it's always sunny in Philadelphia. All right. Have a good one, everybody.